My favorite combiners are the combaticons. And I'll be honest, it's not even because of G1, it's actually because of the Fall of Cybertron video game. I loved playing as those guys and Bruticus, and it led me into G1 and really discovering their origins as characters. It was really cool getting Vortex earlier in the year, but these two came as sort of a surprise, popped up in Australia out of the blue. Nobody really expected them to release so soon, but I'm more than happy to open them up and see how they are. Welcome one and all to the display case. I'm Nate, and today we're looking at Transformers, Age of the Primes, Combaticons, Brawl, and Blastoff. Starting up top, we get some pretty standard boxes for Age of the Primes. Both of them have the figure window where you can see into the box, as well as that golden Age of the Primes strip. Both of them also have really nice key art showing both of the characters in their robot mode and their vehicle mode, Brawl being a tank, and Blastoff turning into a space shuttle. Both boxes also have an age guideline, a step counter, useless, and a badge that says 2 and 3 out of 5 figures needed to build the combiner Bruticus. On the right side of the box, we get that same mural that we've been getting previously of the 13 primes, cropped down to show the one that represents these characters the most, or their descendants. I'm not really sure. Regardless, on the back of the boxes we get a bunch of legalities as well as really nice renders of Brawl and Blastoff in both their robot and vehicle modes. We also get that badge yet again saying 2 and 3 out of 5 bots needed to build Bruticus. Speaking of which, on the left side of the box we get Bruticus himself in artwork form. He's looking awesome and I can't wait to complete him. Yeah, these Decepticon maniacs have never looked better in my opinion. If you didn't already know, in the G1 cartoon, the Combaticons were created when Starscream got marooned on some island, found a bunch of World War II vehicles, and then decided, rightfully so, that he should have his own super team, and then went to Cybertron and broke out a bunch of locked up personality constructs from the Decepticon prison, which he then put into those vehicles, which then changed and turned into the Combaticons. He then used them to pretty thoroughly terrorize both the Autobots and the Decepticons, mostly for the reason that he wanted to get back at Megatron, which makes sense. So looking at these guys with a little bit more detail, Brawl is made with a combination of grey plastic and sort of like an olive drab colour. It's a very military looking green. They've also changed his arms to be more green and grey instead of just grey like in the cartoon, and given him a very cartoon accurate head with that maroony mouthpiece and orange eyes. Picking him up, he's actually, in fact both of them, are very heavy. Their plastic quality feels durable and sturdy and solid. It's a really refreshing change from the previous Combiner figures. However, I'm not a huge fan of this gap at the back of his legs. I wish those side panels could fold in. That would have been great. And I didn't even notice this until I opened him, but he's got this massive screw just sitting on the left side of his chest. It does lead to some articulation you'll see later in the video, but it's definitely not the nicest thing to look at in robot form. On the other side of this coin, Blastoff here is made out of this sort of maroon and dark brown plastic. He's got purple painted highlights throughout on his feet and on his chest, where you can see his Decepticon symbol as well. On top of that, they've given him a cartoon accurate head, where his faceplate and eyes are painted silver, and that top sensor thing is painted pink. I think this was originally a animation error, which weirdly carried through and then maintained for the rest of the character's existence. People do ask how Blastoff sees, whether it's through his silver eyes or his pink sensor thing. I like to think that he sees out of all three. It sort of meshes it all together for me. Just like Brawl, Blastoff is surprisingly sturdy. His plastic quality is great and he feels good in hand. Turning him around, he's also got more purple and pink highlights on his back, mostly for his space shuttle mode. Blastoff's joints are also surprisingly tight, especially compared to the last combaticon we got, Vortex. And I will show you what I mean. Here, if I pick up Vortex, you can see that immediately his joints are a bit loose. His knee can't sustain his whole weight, and he's just floppy overall. Whereas, if I pick up Blastoff, you can literally shake this guy around and his joints will not move at all. It actually takes a little bit of force, which I absolutely love compared to our last few combiner figures. Overall, I'm really actually quite happy to say that these two new figures are some of the sturdiest combiner figures we've ever gotten. Now, Brawl is a Voyager. That being said, he does scale well with Blastoff and some of the other combiner figures we've gotten, like Breakdown and Vortex. That being said, he is smaller as a Voyager than figures like Voyager Starscream or Leader Blitzwing or even Commander Megatron. He's actually roughly the same size as Voyager Scrapper from the Constructicons set, albeit with stronger and heavier plastic, so that does rationalize it for me in being about the same worth. He really fits into that smaller combiner figure category that we've been getting recently, just a bit smaller than the rest of the cast, and probably in service of Bruticus. Being combaticons and for the most part army vehicles, you would assume that these guys also come with a little bit of weaponry, and you'd be right. Both Blastoff and Brawl come with a range of accessories. First up, Blastoff comes with two blaster pistols, or rifles? I'm not quite sure. They fit in his hand and they have 5mm ports. They're pretty simple, but you slot them into his hand, and with both of them together, it looks pretty cool. If you so wish, you can also take them out and slot them into his forearms as sort of forearm cannons, and they look equally as cool here. But if you don't want to have them anywhere at all, you can totally just take them off and put them on his legs where he's got 5mm ports as well. Brawl comes with a roughly show-accurate rendition of his blaster as well, which is sort of like a Browning machine gun that goes with his tank. It can be popped into his hand with a 5mm port and peg combo, but if you don't want to have him holding it, you can also flip Brawl around and plug it into the 5mm port on the back of his tank turret. Alternatively, it does have a little peg on the underside of it that fits into that little peg slot on the left of his original 5mm port on the back of his tank turret. It can fit there and slot in and just sort of sit as a good bit of accessory storage. He also comes with two copies of what I can only assume are anti-aircraft cannons. These don't have a lot to do in his robot mode, but you can store them by plugging them into various locations, namely either side of his tank turret. Now, this looks a little bit silly, it looks like he's got 3 cannons, but there is a better option where you can plug them into the bottom of his tank turret the same way as on his sides, except now they look a little less silly and a little bit more like he's just got anti-aircraft guns on his back. Now, unfortunately, and this is a new one for me, none of these cannons are blast effect compatible. It is really unfortunate because instead of making that little 3.5mm port stick out, they've actually recessed it in to make it look like a tank cannon. And therefore, no 5mm blast effect can go into it. It really sucks, and it's the first time I've ever seen this happen in these new modern figures. Luckily, their regular blasters are blast effect compatible, just like others, the little 3.5mm peg, which a rubber blast effect can just slot onto the top of. But it is still such a shame because if there are any blasters on these guys that I would like to put blast effects onto, it would be Brawl's cannons. And hopefully someone does a third-party kit because I would love the ability to put blast effects on this guy. Now, lucky for these releases, their articulation is actually quite good. In fact, it might even be better than average. Brawl has a ball joint at the base of his head that allows him to look side to side all the way around, a little bit up, a little bit down, and with a little bit of tilt. You can also half engage his transformation by pushing his head a little bit down, allowing him to get a little bit more range. He also has sort of a double jointed butterfly system. This pops out of his chest and allows his shoulders to have more range by bending backwards and forwards just about 45 degrees. His shoulders can also rotate all the way around with about a 90-degree lateral raise, swivel all the way around at the elbow with a 90-degree bend. Unfortunately, no wrist swivel at all, which is a bit of a miss. A fully rotating waist, hips that can kick forwards, backwards, and sideways, full thigh rotation, a 90-degree bend at the knee, ankle tilt that can go over 90 degrees, as well as his foot being able to untab and move forward on its own. Blastoff is pretty similar to the recent ARM-based combiner figures we've gotten, and has a ball joint at the base of his head that can rotate all the way around, as well as flip to look up, pretty far actually, as well as down. He's also able to tilt his head side to side a little bit. All that with a shoulder that can rotate all the way around, as well as raise up 90 degrees. With a bicep swivel that can rotate all the way around as well, and a 90-degree elbow bend. A fully swiveling wrist. A fully swiveling waist that can go all the way around. Hips that can go forwards, backwards, and sideways. Full thigh rotation. A 90-degree bend at the knee. And ankles that can tilt inwards 90 degrees. Blastoff is the only one of these two figures that also has a little 3.5mm port on his backside that you can plug a display stand into. Pair this with a couple of blast effects plugged into the soles of his feet, and you have a pretty cool aerial pose ready to go. So these two compose pretty well. I'd really like how Brawl's feet can move forward. It helps him balance because he's a big hunk of plastic. And while Blastoff's articulation is pretty par for the course, I really like how sturdy he is. He can hold poses really well due to his tight joints. With these guys being combaticons though, their robot modes are only half the story. The other half of the battle is their vehicle modes. Some things I liked about Brawl's transformation were that his legs entirely folded out into the treads for the entire tank. The feet then cover the back of the tank really nicely before the arms take out that front half. With Blastoff, he is essentially the reverse of Vortex. His arms, instead of making up the tail, now make up the front nose cone with that piece sliding over the top, and then his legs make up the entire back. Overall, they both make fairly convincing versions of a space shuttle and a tank respectively. Yeah, there are pros and cons of each, but I think the overall reception is pretty positive. Taking a closer look, you can see just how much that purple highlight on Blastoff's nose cone really comes into play here. That light pink cockpit looks incredible, as well as the 5mm ports for the back thrusters. I also really like that, just like the ARM versions of the aerial bots, most of the body parts go into making the parts for the jet. You don't have really bits of the body just sticking out here, there, and everywhere. And I always love a massive Decepticon symbol. Brawl is also pretty good. He's got a rotating tank turret that can go all the way around and rotates from the center like a tank should. I'm looking at you, Studio Series Megatron, and goes up and down. I am still very salty about not being able to put a blast effect in there though, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, Brawl does have these gappy parts. You can just see directly through the tank mode from the top, which I don't think should be the case. It's really unfortunate, same as that massive gap where the head should be. You can also see the head from the underside, but luckily it's sort of obscured by this piece going across it. I do like, however, that each side of the tank is fully covered. There is no massive gap in the back or anything really super obvious. So that is a plus for me. You can also attach all the accessories from before onto their vehicle modes as well. Those anti-aircraft barrels from before now serve a greater purpose in Brawl's tank mode. You can just plug them into the top of the back of the tank, where they can tilt about 45 degrees up and down. If you don't like that, you can also plug them into the side of the tank turret, where you can give him essentially 3 tank barrels, but I think, quite frankly, it looks a bit stupid. Kinda like a tank pitchfork. For our third option, you can also tab them into the back of the tank turret for a closer look, and I guess it's the same as right on the back of the tank, except they're slightly more separated apart now, and it's just a different look. You can choose whichever one you like. You can also take that Browning machine gun from before that Brawl uses as a blaster and plug it into the tank hatch. This kinda looks just like a Browning machine gun on a tank, which is pretty cool. Alternatively, just like before, you can take it off and tab that bottom piece into the tab hole on the side of the tank turret, which maybe looks a little bit more natural, but just like the anti-aircraft barrels, it's your choice. With Blastoff, his accessory options are a little bit more limited. You can just take those 2 blasters from before and just tab them under the wings, just like any real Transformers jet out there. But given that they're 5mm port compatible, you can also plug them in what used to be the hands and what used to be the forearms. But while it does look cool, it does limit the ability for the aircraft to actually sit on a flat surface. Naturally, both of these combaticons look really good next to the first release combaticon, Vortex, that came out earlier this year. And now that we have 3 out of the 5 combaticons in front of us, it's making me really excited to see Swindle and Onslaught as part of the 5. And speaking of the 5, both of these guys have secret third modes that aren't in the instructions that contribute to getting Bruticus assembled. With Brawl, you essentially want to start by untabbing the arms, shifting the tank turret forward, untabbing the treads and his feet before folding them down, then looking inside his feet and folding out these little angled pieces. You then close up his feet, making sure everything fits together before collapsing the treads and making sure that they're angled perpendicular to the bottom of the foot. You then rotate his knees so that his crotch and waist is sort of at the top of that whole assembly. All that before rotating around the tank turret and then folding down that whole upper chest piece. You then take the arms, fold them up and at a right angle at the elbow, and voila, you have Bruticus's left foot. In all honesty, it's really hard to judge this thing before seeing the rest of Bruticus. Yes, I would have loved if the front half of the tank could sit above that tank turret piece. I feel like that would have given us more Brawl in the knee. Configuring it like that also actually makes it the same height as Superion's legs, so I don't know, I guess we'll see when Onslaught comes out. In this mode, he also has a little bit of articulation, and this is actually where that massive screw from the robot mode comes into play. He actually has a 45-degree ankle tilt, and it's pretty good. It's nice and tight, and I don't really have any issues with it. He also, because of his waist swivel, has a rotating foot. I'm not sure if this is going to make it into Onslaught, but I can hope so. Unfortunately though, in this lies a potentially fatal flaw. If I open it up for you guys and I adjust my lighting so you can see it just right, in there you can see in that little hinge there is a massive stress mark. Now I have 2 of these guys and both of them have this same issue. I haven't been very rough with them or played with them a whole lot, but I would express extreme caution when handling this guy in this form. It is really unfortunate that it has come to this from a Hasbro product. Now, conversely, and luckily, Blastoff is extremely easy to get into his combined form. You literally just take a thin object, slide it into that slot on the middle of his chest, and that will allow you to split him into his 2 halves. You then take a compatible combiner, like Superion here, and plug him directly into the bottom and top of his arms respectively. Give the other arm of Superion a bit of a replacement with Vortex, and you have a pretty good idea of what Bruticus's arms are going to look like. And honestly, if I wasn't excited for Bruticus to be finished before, now I am overexcited. I cannot wait. So bring on Onslaught and bring on Swindle, because my year cannot get any better. Just a side note, it is also really cool to see that you can plug blast effects into the bottom and the front, I guess, of Vortex and Blast Off respectively. These look really cool when you have them all together. Now when all is said and done, it's pretty safe to assume that the combaticons are going to be something special when they're all complete. And these two releases in particular are quite good. Their articulation is nice, they're sturdy, strong, and tight jointed. Not to say there aren't any issues, that stress mark on Brawl's joint really has me worried for the future of Bruticus. But I have a feeling that maybe loosening that screw might solve the issue. Even comparing these guys to all of the aerial bots and all of the stunticons, they definitely have some of the best plastic quality, build, and engineering of the lot. And I can confidently say that I am so hyped for the rest of Starscream's brigade to come to my collection. Thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it. If you liked this one, feel free to check out my channel for more videos just like this. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe, or even a comment with your own thoughts on Brawl and Blast Off. I look forward to reading them. Thank you again, and we'll catch up soon.